Hey, let's make something. Today we've got punch, plum pudding, mince pies, and let's see, oranges, pears, and apples. So I'm starting with the punch here. I decided because in Dickens' time, something very popular was a rum punch. So I'm using brown and a touch of red here to make it look like this punch is mostly rum and some brandy, and then lemon juice and water and sugar. So I'm making that with UV resin. And in the story, it was a hot punch, so I really should have used a metal punch bowl, but I kind of made a stylistic choice here. You wouldn't really be able to see the punch very well if the bowl was silver, so I went with the clear plastic, like a glass punch bowl. But I found from past projects that the UV resin reacts with the plastic, and it can create some really large bubbles when you cure it in the plastic. So you can see here, I used this mold to make the punch separate from the bowl, and now I'm adding it in. So it's just slightly smaller than the diameter of the bowl. And I figure if I fill it with clear resin, you won't be able to tell that it's clear, and then this will stop the brown color, making the things I'm going to float in the bowl look muddy or like syrupy or something. So yeah, you can see here I'm using some of those lemon slices I made before. Those are already baked and coated in clear resin. It's a shame UV resin contracts a little bit when you cure it, so the edges are a little higher than the center. So you can kind of see that effect in the finished bowl. I'm adding some cranberries. And now I'm making a plum pudding. This is brown polymer clay, Fimo Soft, with some nutmeg. Nutmeg or sand or anything chunky that can go in the oven is great for giving a rough texture. I'm also using some poppy seeds. And because a plum pudding just has a simple rounded shape, I could have made this by hand, but I decided to mold it into a plastic ice bucket, I think this is, because it's the same shape as a pudding basin. So using some cornstarch so it won't stick, which doesn't always work, as you're about to see. I do like this shape though. I do think it's worth it, even though I had to pull it out with tweezers. But luckily, the bottom won't be shown. So even though that got a little bit destroyed, it's okay. And then to give it a rougher texture, I just sort of scribbled all over it with a needle tool. And plum puddings have a rough texture, but then it's also very smooth because they're shaped by the basin. So once I put some glaze on that, it'll smooth it out. Here I'm rolling out pie crust for mince pies. This is just a mixture of white and transparent clay with just a little bit of yellow and brown. And I'm doing the same technique that I did for making those plates and bowls, which is to take a circle a little bit bigger than the hole of a stencil, and then gently pushing it down with some type of cylinder that has a flat bottom. This is a wide piece of wire for making beads, which work very well. And then I'm putting the crimped edges on with a tool, which is a little tricky because the crimped edges make it stick to the stencil. So I'm just using my knife to gently pull up the edges, trying not to distort the shape. Now I've made 7 of them and I've baked them, and now I'm coloring them with a touch of brown pastel to try to make them look nicely browned in the oven. It works best to make your clay the color of unbaked dough, and then you add the look of baked dough with pastels or paints afterwards. Here I made a mixture of, liquid Sculpey, a touch of brown acrylic paint, and then nutmeg and coffee grounds, because I wanted to give that chunky mince look. I'm sort of jumping between projects because I am trying to bake things in batches. So here I'm making oranges, which are very easy to make because the orange clay you get is bright orange and slightly translucent, and that is exactly the look you want for an orange. So I just rolled them into pretty close to perfect spheres. Added a little dimple for the stem end. And another tiny dimple at the other end. I think I was going for navel oranges, perhaps. That's not required though, some oranges don't have that extra dimple. And then to get that texture citrus skin has with the pores all over, a toothbrush is a great tool. And I'm using a bright green for the pears and a more yellow green for the apples. You can see I've just rolled up some spheres. I decided to make 3 of each. I was just kind of estimating what would fill up that tray that I made earlier. And if you press down on a ball of clay while you're rolling it, you can turn it into a pear shape. If you press down unevenly, I should say, just on one side. Again, I'm adding dimples to the ends and then one at the top for the stem. And around the sides, I just sort of pressed roughly here and there because fruit isn't perfectly symmetrical, so if it's a little lumpy, that's fine. Here I'm using some bristles from a really rough old plastic paintbrush I had that had brown bristles. So I cut some lengths of those and I'm using those as fruit stems. And the apples, I left mostly round. This type of apple, I'm going for a Cox's Orange Pippin, is pretty much round, a little bit lumpy, so I let them be slightly lumpy. Now I'm filling in the mince pies with that mixture. I had hoped that the liquid Sculpey clay would shrink more in the oven and leave that rough texture. It sort of puffed up and made them very smooth, which I don't love, but I think next time, if I ever were to make mince pies, I would do that afterwards with some glue, because I know the glue would shrink. And now I'm gluing that plum pudding to its plate. And adding some gloss glaze so it has a nice shiny appearance. Gloss glaze for those too. And these types of apples often have red streaks on the sides, and you'll see vertical streaks as if they've been hit with a rough paintbrush. So I am using a rough paintbrush to simulate that. Just a little crimson red paint. It's nice because you don't have to be too exact. And now I'm using that same rough paintbrush to add some powdered sugar to those mince pies, just white paint. And here for the hard sauce on the plum pudding, I've added Mod Podge mixed with a little bit of white paint. And I'm using a ball stylus to make drips, as if it's melting over the top of the pudding. And back when I made the table and I made all those holly leaves and berries, I saved this little capper because I knew I would put it on the plum pudding. And the pears, I just used some red-brown paint and I put that onto that little toothbrush I had and I splattered it over one side of the pears. Here I'm just using some PVA glue and putting things wherever I think they look good. Choosing just the right apple for the top. I started from the top so I could choose the nicest piece of each thing, the ones you'll be able to see the most. Gotta find the right side of that apple too. Yeah, there we go. That worked out very well. I wish that mince pie filling, like I said, had looked chunkier, but I think it's alright. I'm pretty happy with how everything turned out. I couldn't fit that one orange, you can see. So I think I will have that on the table, loose. But here are the finished pieces, and next time we will finish the entire table. So I hope you'll join me then.